Step back for a moment into an early 1980s classroom, where the morning light slipped through drafty windows and settled across rows of polished wooden desks. You can almost hear the scrape of chairs, the shuffle of exercise books, and that unmistakable hush before lessons began. And there was a time when one simple rule shaped the entire room. You stood the second a senior teacher walked in. No hesitation, no debate, and no one questioned it. It was simply how things were. Looking back now, it feels impossible, a glimpse into a world that followed a different logic. Yet for millions of us, these routines were everyday life, woven into our school days without a second thought. And as we revisit more of these forgotten rules, you may find yourself laughing, shaking your head, and remembering a world long gone. To understand those old rules, you first have to step into the mindset of 1980s Britain. When schools ran on a rhythm that feels almost foreign today, life was simpler in many ways. There were fewer policies, fewer layers of approval, and a deep trust placed in teachers to guide a room full of pupils with a firm voice and a steady hand. It wasn't about paperwork or procedures. It was about getting on with the day. The environment itself shaped this approach. Chalk dust floated gently through sunbeams. Paper registers rustled as they were ticked off each morning, and assembly halls echoed with the sound of hundreds of shoes on wooden floors. Rules were clear, routines were predictable, and every pupil knew their place within the structure. Yet for all the order, there was also a surprising freedom, long corridors to roam during breaks, open fields for play, and a sense that childhood had room to stretch. It was this blend of structure and independence that created the foundation for the rules that followed. And those rules, as you'll see next, revealed just how differently everyday school life once operated. What's most striking about 1980s school life is how ordinary some unbelievable rules felt at the time. Take the uniform, for example. Every detail mattered: the exact shade of jumper, the length of a skirt or trousers, the shine on your shoes. Teachers could spot a missing badge or a loose tie from halfway down the corridor, and there was an unspoken expectation that you arrived looking ready for the day. It wasn't considered strict. It was simply the routine everyone accepted. Then came morning assembly, a ritual that never ran late. Hundreds of pupils gathered in neat rows, wet coats steaming gently as they dried, while the echo of footsteps filled the hall. The calm hush before the head teacher spoke felt almost ceremonial. It set the tone, reminding everyone that school followed a shared rhythm. Appearance checks were woven into everyday life to a quick glance at hair, shoes, or uniform as you walked in. No drama, no fuss, just another small part of the order that shaped the day. And before every lesson, you lined up outside the classroom, rain or shine, drizzle-soaked collars, puddles gathered at your feet, but the line remained. It was a quiet exercise in patience, something pupils simply learned without question. Perhaps the most surprising rule was the silent corridor periods. At certain times of day, especially after assembly or during transitions, you walked in complete quiet. The only sounds were your footsteps and the soft rub of satchels swinging at your side. It created a focus, a sense that learning had its own atmosphere. Looking back, these routines formed a framework that shaped character, discipline, and calm. And as we move deeper into the story, the next set of rules becomes even more surprising. Some of the expectations that slipped quietly into 1980s school life would cause quite a stir in a modern classroom. One of the most memorable was the weekly workbook inspection. Every exercise book, maths, English, science, you name it, had to be handed in, stacked neatly on the teacher's desk. Pages were checked for neatness, margins, correct headings, and overall effort. If this happened today, emails would fly within minutes, but back then, it was simply part of keeping standards high. Then, there were the weekly handwriting lessons, entire sessions dedicated to forming loops, spacing words, and keeping lines perfectly straight. Many pupils groaned their way through it, yet the quiet scratch of pencils filling the room is a sound people still remember fondly. Classrooms also ran on the absolute authority of the teacher when it came to seating. If you were moved, you were moved. No debate, no explanation, no gentle negotiation. One moment you were beside your best friend, and the next you were across the room, hoping you hadn't been separated for whispering too much. Surprise desk checks were another feature of the era. A teacher might walk in, lift the lid of a wooden desk, and gently remind you that crisp wrappers, loose papers, and forgotten worksheets didn't belong there. It wasn't meant to catch anyone out. It was simply another way of keeping life orderly. And then there were whole class detentions, sometimes handed out because a room grew too noisy or because everyone began packing away early. Today, such a rule would spark meetings and follow-up discussions, but back then, it was accepted with a collective sigh. These expectations, once so normal, revealed just how differently schools functioned and how the next set of unwritten rules shaped the heart of everyday school life. Some of the most memorable rules of 1980s school life were never written down at all. They were simply understood. One of the clearest examples was standing whenever a senior teacher entered the room. It wasn't announced or discussed the moment the door opened. Chairs scraped back in unison. It was a small gesture of respect, performed without a single reminder. Today, it would feel almost theatrical, but back then, it was second nature. Queuing was another unwritten expectation. Whether lining up for the dinner hall, the library trolley, or the bus home, pupils formed long, patient lines that rarely needed supervising. You learned early that fairness mattered, and that cutting in was guaranteed to earn a chorus of disapproval from everyone around you. Addressing teachers by their title was also an unshakable part of daily life. First names belonged firmly to adulthood. Pupils used formal titles without hesitation. It created a gentle boundary, a reminder that school had its own hierarchy. Even exercise books followed quiet traditions. Many were carefully covered in brown paper, old wallpaper scraps, or offcuts supplied by families. It protected the books, but it also reflected the pride pupils took in their work. Each cover was a tiny badge of responsibility. They handed out books, recorded names during quiet time, and sometimes even led the line to assembly. It was a small role, yet it taught responsibility in a way that left its mark. These subtle habits shaped the everyday rhythm of school life, creating a culture built on respect, patience, and shared understanding foundations that set the stage for deeper reflection on what these routines truly meant. Looking back, many of those old routines felt tough at the time, yet they quietly shaped us in ways we only recognize as adults. The rules weren't just rules, they built character without ever needing to announce it. Standing when someone important entered the room taught respect. Queuing patiently taught fairness. Being moved seats or having exercise books checked taught resilience, the gentle kind that grows when you learn to adapt without making a fuss. There was a simplicity to the era that feels almost comforting now. Days were structured, expectations were clear, and despite the occasional grumble, there was humor in it all. We laugh today about lining up in the rain or whispering during silent corridors because those moments belong to a shared childhood that millions experienced together. What really stays with us isn't the strictness, but the sense of community woven through every school day. We learned to look out for one another, to follow routines that kept life steady, and to take pride in small responsibilities. And as we reflect on these memories, it's impossible not to see how they connect to the world we know today. When we compare those classrooms to today's, the contrast is striking. Modern schools run on new ideas, fresh approaches, and a very different rhythm. Yet the memories of our own school days remain bright and unshaken. Those old routines, however unusual they seem now, helped shape who we became. Patient, adaptable, and quietly resilient. They gave us stories to smile at, moments to treasure, and a sense of belonging that time can't erase. And as we look back with warmth, it's hard not to feel grateful for the era that formed us, a world that now lives only in memory. For more of these unbelievable memories, tap the video on your screen. The 1970s stories are something else. Don't forget to subscribe.